Have you ever wondered what it takes to survive in the most impossible situations? What would you do if you were thrown into a den full of hungry lions with no way out? This is the story of Daniel, a man whose faith was tested in the most terrifying way imaginable. But why was Daniel, a trusted advisor to the king, thrown into such a deadly place? And more importantly, how did he survive? Daniel's story begins in ancient Babylon, a powerful empire ruled by King Darius. Babylon was known for its wealth and power, but also for its intrigue and treachery. Among the king's many advisors, Daniel stood out. He was wise, honest, and deeply devoted to God. His ability to interpret dreams and his insight into difficult matters earned him a place of high honor in the court. Daniel wasn't originally from Babylon. He was a Jew, taken captive from Jerusalem when Babylon conquered Israel. Despite being far from home, Daniel remained faithful to his God, the God of Israel, and his loyalty to God shaped every decision he made. Now, let's take a closer look at the setting. King Darius had recently come to power and was organizing his vast kingdom. To manage it effectively, he appointed 120 governors over different regions, with 3 administrators overseeing them. Daniel was one of these administrators, and soon he distinguished himself above the others. The king saw something special in Daniel and planned to set him over the whole kingdom. This decision didn't sit well with the other officials. They were jealous and resentful of Daniel's favor with the king. They searched for a way to bring him down. But Daniel's honesty and integrity left them with no legitimate reason to accuse him, so they devised a cunning plan to use Daniel's faith against him. The officials knew that Daniel prayed to his God 3 times a day no matter what. So they approached King Darius with a proposal. They suggested that the king issue a decree stating that anyone who prayed to any god or human being other than the king for the next 30 days would be thrown into the lion's den. Flattered by the idea of being the sole object of worship, Darius agreed and signed the decree into law. According to the customs of the Medes and Persians, a law signed by the king could not be altered or repealed, not even by the king himself. Daniel, aware of the new law, could have easily hidden his prayers or stopped praying altogether. But he didn't. He remained steadfast in his faith, praying openly to God just as he had always done. This act of faith was exactly what his enemies were waiting for. They quickly reported Daniel's disobedience to the king. When King Darius heard about Daniel's actions, he was deeply distressed. He valued Daniel and didn't want to see him harmed, but his hands were tied. The law was the law, and even the king couldn't change it. Despite his efforts to find a loophole, Darius was forced to order Daniel's execution. Daniel was brought to the lion's den, a dark and terrifying pit where ferocious lions were kept hungry for occasions just like this. As he was lowered into the den, a stone was rolled over the entrance, sealing him inside. The king, heartbroken, returned to his palace, unable to eat or sleep, knowing that one of his most trusted advisors was facing certain death. But Daniel's story doesn't end here. As Daniel spent the night in the lion's den, something extraordinary happened. According to the Bible, God sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions. The ferocious beasts that were meant to tear Daniel apart instead lay quietly, as harmless as kittens. Daniel's faith had not gone unnoticed by God, and in the face of what should have been his final moments, he was kept safe and unharmed. At first light, King Darius rushed to the lion's den. His voice trembled as he called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" To his amazement and relief, Daniel answered back, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." King Darius was overjoyed. He ordered that Daniel be lifted out of the den immediately. As the crowd watched in awe, they saw that Daniel wasn't hurt at all. No wounds, no scratches. His survival was nothing short of a miracle. But the story doesn't end there. The same officials who had plotted against Daniel were thrown into the lion's den along with their families. Unlike Daniel, they didn't survive. The lions overpowered them before they even reached the floor of the den. This turn of events made it clear to everyone that Daniel's God was real and powerful. King Darius then issued a new decree. He commanded that everyone in his kingdom must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. The king declared, "For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So why was Daniel thrown into the lion's den? It was a result of jealousy and a plot by those who couldn't stand his integrity and favor with the king. How did he survive 6 days in such a deadly place? Daniel's faith in God and God's intervention saved him. And what role did God play? God protected Daniel, demonstrating his power and justice, not just to Daniel and King Darius, but to an entire kingdom. Daniel's story is more than just a tale of survival. It's a testament to the power of faith and the belief that no matter how dire the situation, there's a higher power that can save us. Keep watching, because there's much more to learn from this incredible story. What makes a person truly stand out in a world full of power and ambition? How does one man rise above others, not through wealth or force, but through wisdom, integrity, and an unshakable faith? This is the story of Daniel, a man whose character was so remarkable that even kings took notice. Daniel was not born into the luxury of Babylonian royalty. He was a young Jewish noble taken captive from Jerusalem when Babylon's armies conquered his homeland. Despite being a captive in a foreign land, Daniel quickly distinguished himself. He was chosen for his intelligence and potential to serve in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of Babylon before King Darius. Daniel and his friends were taught the language and literature of the Babylonians, but Daniel never forgot who he was or the God he served. From the very beginning, Daniel's life was marked by his deep commitment to his faith. Even in the face of pressure to conform to the Babylonian way of life, Daniel held fast to the laws and customs of his people. One of the earliest examples of this is when Daniel refused to eat the royal food and wine, which had been offered to idols, instead choosing a diet of vegetables and water. This small act of defiance wasn't just about food, it was a statement of his devotion to God, a devotion that would define his entire life. As the years passed, Daniel's wisdom and integrity became evident to everyone around him. He interpreted dreams that baffled the wisest men in Babylon, and each time, he gave credit to God for his abilities. When Nebuchadnezzar had a troubling dream that none of his advisors could explain, Daniel stepped forward. He not only revealed the dream but also its meaning, saving the lives of the king's advisors and earning Nebuchadnezzar's respect. Daniel's reputation grew, and with it, his influence. By the time Darius became king, Daniel was an older man, but his wisdom and integrity had only deepened with age. King Darius quickly recognized Daniel's exceptional qualities and made him one of the top 3 administrators over the entire kingdom. In fact, Daniel's performance was so outstanding that the king considered setting him over the entire kingdom. But Daniel's rise to power wasn't just about his intelligence or political skill. It was rooted in his unwavering integrity and his commitment to his faith. Unlike many in positions of power, Daniel wasn't swayed by wealth or corrupted by ambition. He lived by a simple principle: to serve God faithfully, no matter the cost. Even as he held high office in a pagan empire, Daniel remained devoted to the God of Israel. 3 times a day, without fail, Daniel would pray to God facing Jerusalem. This wasn't a show for others to see, it was a private act of worship, a routine that had sustained him through years of exile and service in a foreign land. His faith was the foundation of his character, guiding every decision he made. Daniel's commitment to God was not just a personal matter. It was well known among those around him. His enemies knew that the only way to trap him was to create a conflict between his duty to the king and his devotion to God. And even when this trap was set, Daniel didn't hesitate. He continued to pray, fully aware of the consequences, because he trusted that God's will was more important than his own safety. Daniel's story isn't just about the miraculous events that surrounded him. It's about the man behind those miracles. A man who, in a world full of temptation and corruption, chose to live by a higher standard. His life is a powerful example of how integrity and faith can set someone apart, even in the most challenging of circumstances. Daniel's unwavering commitment to God didn't just earn him the respect of kings. It also set the stage for one of the most dramatic demonstrations of God's power: the night in the lion's den. But that moment of divine intervention was only possible because of the lifetime of faith and integrity that came before it. Daniel wasn't just a wise advisor or a skilled administrator. He was a man who lived out his faith in every aspect of his life, and it was this faith that ultimately saved him from the lions and brought glory to God in a pagan land. His story reminds us that true greatness comes not from power or position, but from living a life of integrity and faith, no matter the cost. What would you do if someone's goodness and success became a threat to your own ambitions? How far would you go to bring them down? This is exactly what happened to Daniel, a man so favored by the king that it stirred up dangerous jealousy among his peers. Daniel's rise to prominence in King Darius's court didn't go unnoticed. As one of the top 3 administrators in the kingdom, Daniel was not only trusted but was also on the verge of being promoted to oversee the entire realm. This level of influence and power made him a target for envy. The other officials, driven by their own ambitions, couldn't stand the thought of Daniel, a foreigner and a man of faith, holding such a high position. They were jealous of the king's trust in him and knew that as long as Daniel was around, they would never be able to gain more power for themselves. But they also knew something else. Daniel was untouchable when it came to his work. He was honest, diligent, and incorruptible. There were no scandals to exploit, no mistakes to expose. Unable to find any fault in his duties, Daniel's enemies turned their attention to his faith. They knew that Daniel's devotion to God was the one area where he would never compromise. So, they devised a scheme that would force him into a corner, making his faith the very thing that would lead to his downfall. The officials approached King Darius with a proposal, cleverly disguising their malicious intent as loyalty. They suggested that the king issue a decree that no one in the kingdom could pray to any god or human being other than the king himself for 30 days. Anyone caught breaking this law would be thrown into the lion's den, a punishment designed to be both cruel and final. Flattered by the idea of being the sole focus of worship in his kingdom, King Darius agreed and signed the decree into law. The officials had succeeded in creating a law that they knew Daniel would break. They knew that no threat, not even death, would stop Daniel from praying to his God. When the news reached King Darius, the full weight of the situation hit him. He realized that he had been manipulated into condemning his most trusted advisor. The king was filled with regret, but he was trapped by the very law he had signed. According to the customs of the Medes and Persians, a decree issued by the king could not be changed or repealed, not even by the king himself. Darius spent the entire day trying to find a way to save Daniel, but there was no escape from the law. The officials had seen to that. In the end, the king had no choice but to order that Daniel be thrown into the lion's den. But even as he gave the order, his heart was heavy with sorrow. He knew that Daniel was innocent and that he had been betrayed by those he trusted. Before Daniel was lowered into the den, King Darius spoke words that revealed his own hope and desperation. "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." These were the words of a man who knew he had made a terrible mistake but could do nothing to undo it. The stone was rolled over the entrance to the den, sealing Daniel's fate, or so it seemed. That night, the king couldn't eat or sleep. He fasted and refused any entertainment, haunted by the thought of Daniel facing the lions alone. But what the king didn't know was that this would not be the end of Daniel's story. The plot against him, born out of jealousy and deceit, would soon be turned on its head in a way that no one could have anticipated. How would you react if your faith was tested in the most extreme way possible? Would you stand firm, even if it meant facing death? Daniel did. His faith wasn't just a part of his life, it was the foundation of everything he did. Even when he knew that praying to God would lead him to the lion's den, Daniel didn't hesitate. His relationship with God was unbreakable, and nothing, not even the threat of a brutal death, could shake his trust. When the decree was issued, Daniel could have easily prayed in secret. He could have closed his windows, whispered his prayers, or even waited until the 30 days had passed. But Daniel wasn't one to hide his devotion. He understood the risk, yet he chose to continue his prayers exactly as before, openly, with his windows facing Jerusalem. 3 times a day, Daniel knelt and prayed to God, thanking him and seeking his guidance. It was an act of defiance against the king's decree, but more importantly, it was an act of unwavering faith. Daniel knew that his enemies were watching, waiting for him to make a move that would seal his fate. He knew that the consequences of his prayers could be deadly, but he trusted that God's will was greater than any earthly law or punishment. As Daniel prayed, he wasn't just seeking protection. He was demonstrating a trust in God that went beyond the fear of death. His prayers were a testimony to his belief that God was in control, even in the face of what seemed like certain doom. Imagine a pit, dark and deep, where the air is thick with the scent of fear. The ground is hard and cold, littered with bones, remnants of those who didn't survive. In this pit, hungry lions pace restlessly, their powerful bodies ready to pounce, their eyes glowing in the darkness. This is the lion's den, a place designed to instill terror, where death is swift and brutal. When the order was given, Daniel was taken to this very place. The journey to the lion's den must have been filled with tension, but Daniel remained calm, his faith unwavering. As he approached the edge of the pit, the sight of the lions waiting below would have been enough to break the spirit of any ordinary person. But Daniel was not ordinary. His trust in God gave him strength, even as he faced the terrifying reality of what was about to happen. Without resistance, Daniel allowed himself to be lowered into the den. The lions, sensing the presence of new prey, stirred with anticipation. As Daniel reached the bottom, the stone was rolled over the entrance, sealing him inside. The darkness closed in, and all that could be heard was the sound of the lions, moving closer. From above, the king and the officials watched as the stone was set in place. For them, this marked the end of the story, a tragic conclusion to the life of a man who had been too faithful, too honest, too good. But for Daniel, this was not the end. Alone in the darkness, surrounded by the most dangerous predators, Daniel stood firm in his faith, believing that God was with him, even in the lion's den. The night stretched on, the hours crawling by as Daniel remained in the den. Outside, King Darius couldn't sleep. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Daniel, wondering if his God would truly save him. The tension was unbearable. Would Daniel survive until morning? Or would the lions do what they had done to so many before him? As the stone lay unmoved and the den remained sealed, no one knew what was happening inside. Was Daniel already gone, or was something miraculous taking place? The suspense hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as everyone waited for dawn to reveal the outcome. What was happening in that dark pit? Was Daniel's faith enough to protect him from the jaws of the lions, or would this be the end of a man who refused to abandon his God? The answer would come with the first light of morning, and it would be something that no one, except perhaps Daniel, could have predicted. In the dead of night, when all seemed lost, something extraordinary happened in the lion's den. The Bible tells us that God sent an angel to Daniel, an unseen protector in the midst of danger. As the lions prowled around Daniel, their fierce jaws ready to strike, the angel intervened. One by one, the mouths of the lions were shut tight, their ferocity tamed by a divine force. The lions, once ravenous and lethal, became as harmless as lambs. The scene in the den shifted from one of imminent death to one of miraculous preservation. Daniel, who had been prepared to face whatever God willed, now stood among the silent lions, untouched and unharmed. The den that was meant to be his grave had become a place where God's power was on full display. While the world outside was filled with tension and fear, inside the den, Daniel remained calm. His faith, which had guided him throughout his life, now gave him peace in the most terrifying circumstances. He knew that God was with him, and this knowledge brought him a sense of tranquility that no one could have expected. Daniel spent the night in prayer and communion with God, his heart filled with trust. Even surrounded by lions, he was not afraid. He had placed his life in God's hands, and God had responded with a miracle. The same lions that had been poised to tear him apart now lay quietly beside him, subdued by the presence of the angel. As the first light of dawn broke over Babylon, King Darius hurried to the lion's den. The night had been agonizing for the king. He had been unable to sleep, tormented by the thought that his beloved advisor, Daniel, had been lost because of a law he had been tricked into signing. With each step towards the den, the king's heart pounded with dread. What if the lions had done their worst? What if Daniel, the man he respected so much, was gone? When Darius reached the den, he called out with a voice full of anxiety and hope, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" The king's words hung in the air as everyone around waited in breathless silence. Then, from the darkness of the den, a voice answered back. It was Daniel's voice, strong and clear. "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." Relief washed over Darius as he heard these words. Daniel was alive. The miracle that had taken place in the den was undeniable. God had not only saved Daniel, but had also shown his power in a way that would be remembered for generations. The king immediately ordered that the stone be rolled away, and Daniel was lifted out of the den. As he emerged, everyone could see that he was completely unharmed. No scratches, no injuries. The king's joy was immeasurable. He had feared the worst, but what he saw before him was nothing short of a divine intervention. Daniel's faith had not only saved him from death, but it also transformed the heart of a king, proving that with God, nothing is impossible. As the stone was rolled away from the entrance of the lion's den, all eyes were on the dark opening. What would emerge? Moments later, Daniel stepped out, completely unharmed. There wasn't a single scratch on him, not a single mark of violence. The lions, known for their ferocity, had not laid a paw on him. The sight of Daniel, alive and well, was nothing short of miraculous. The crowd that had gathered around the den watched in awe as Daniel walked out, his faith fully vindicated. The den, a place of terror and death, had become a stage for one of the most profound demonstrations of God's power. Daniel's survival was a living testament to the God he served, a God who could deliver his faithful servant from the most impossible of situations. King Darius, who had spent the night in torment, was overcome with joy and relief. He had feared the worst, but now he witnessed the best possible outcome. Daniel was safe, thanks to the God he continually worshipped. The king, who had been manipulated into signing a law that condemned Daniel, now publicly acknowledged the power of Daniel's God. Darius praised God, declaring, "He is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." The king's words were a powerful recognition of God's sovereignty, and they echoed across the kingdom, sending a clear message. The God of Daniel is a God who saves. But the story didn't end with Daniel's miraculous escape. Justice had to be served. The men who had plotted against Daniel, who had used deceit and manipulation to trap him, were now faced with the consequences of their actions. At the king's command, these men, along with their families, were thrown into the very lion's den they had intended for Daniel. As they were lowered into the pit, the outcome was immediate and brutal. The lions, who had remained calm in Daniel's presence, pounced on the conspirators before they even hit the ground. The same beast that had miraculously spared Daniel tore apart his enemies, leaving no doubt that this was not just a coincidence but a divine act of justice. This swift and decisive end to Daniel's enemies served as a stark reminder to all who witnessed it. God's protection over his faithful is real, and those who oppose his will ultimately face the consequences. The lion's den, meant to be a place of execution for Daniel, had become a place of divine retribution for those who sought to harm him. The miracle of Daniel's survival and the fate of his enemies left an indelible mark on the kingdom. Through this event, God's power and justice were made clear, not just to Daniel and King Darius, but to the entire empire. The story of Daniel and the lion's den is more than just an ancient tale. It's a powerful lesson in faith, trust, and the triumph of good over evil. Daniel's unwavering belief in God, even in the face of certain death, shows us the strength that comes from trusting in something greater than ourselves. His story reminds us that, no matter how dark or hopeless our circumstances may seem, faith can carry us through. Daniel's enemies plotted against him, confident that their scheme would bring him down. But in the end, it was their own deceit that led to their downfall. This story teaches us that goodness, integrity, and trust in God can overcome even the most cunning and malicious plans. It's a reminder that in the battle between good and evil, good will always prevail when we remain steadfast in our beliefs. As you reflect on this story, consider how you can apply its lessons in your own life. When faced with challenges, hold on to your faith. When others try to bring you down, stay true to your values. And remember, just like Daniel's, you're never alone. There's a higher power watching over you, ready to protect and guide you. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. By staying connected, you'll hear more stories that remind us of the power of faith, the importance of integrity, and the victory of good over evil. Thanks for watching.